If I could hand you one trick to spot a liar instantly, would you use it on your boss? Your best friend? The stranger who swears they found your wallet but can't remember where? Or would you save it for the moments that matter, like the night a non-profit annual gala froze mid-toast because $40,000 vanished between the ballroom and the back office, and the only person with access said, "To be honest, I didn't even go near the safe." After a half-second pause that felt like a curtain snagging on a nail, "Here, as the hook you need, and the only trick worth memorizing." A liar hates the unexpected. So, flip the stories, direction ask them, to tell what happened backwards, step by step. Then listen for the lag, and the way their details turn generic, because fabricated memories stumble when you make them walk in reverse. That night, amid crystal glasses and lemon cleaner, I watched the clean lines of a lie wrinkle when I said, "Start from right now and take me back to your first touch on the back office door, each object you touched, each person you passed." And the CFO smiled in a photograph way and said, "Sure." Just late enough for the word to clink against the glass between us, and I felt like the edge of a draft under a door, that the truth was about to shift the room. It had rained earlier, and the carpet carried a faint dampness. A smell like a cool-down iron, mingling with perfume and something sugary the caterer loved to torch on their beer. The chandelier looked like a frozen galaxy over people in tuxedos and saris, who were still talking about impact and literacy, while the building itself seemed to lean toward the back office where the night had developed its bruise. My friend, Lena, head of programs, gladiator, insensible, heels, found me near the coat check and gripped my wrist the way you grip a rope on a rocking boat. "Please, Zoya, they were going to pin this on Mina because she knew and she kept the ledger tonight." And I said, "Tell me everything," because I knew 3 things without needing to be told. The board would need a villain before the donors sobered up. The security cameras were down for maintenance at the exact hour when money grows legs in stories like this. And the CFO, a man named Ravi, with a perpetually kind smile and a voice that could sell pillows to already offered the narrative everyone could live with. Mina misplaced the cash drop. Everyone makes mistakes. We'll look into it. A lullaby with corporate I pulled Ravi out into the hallway where the fluorescence did nobody any favors and asked nothing questions to catch his rhythm. "How many guests tonight? Do you think the band is too loud for the donors? Which caterer did we use, Mall? Talk with a scalpel tucked inside. Because before you ask someone to step onto the ice, you should know how they skate." His cadence in those minutes was all butter smooth and ready, a host on autopilot, sentences landing neat as napkins. Then I flipped the table. "Let us reconstruct the last 20 minutes in reverse. Start from this moment. Walk me back to the safe room, step by step, every door you pushed, every person within arm's reach. I'll stop you for details," and I watched the space between my instruction and his. He broke eye contact to smooth his tie, then began, "I'm here now, talking to you. Before that, I was in the ballroom. Before that, I was in the corridor near the bathrooms. Before that, I checked if the flowers were okay, and that solitary ooh was a stone on a still pond." Because Heidi had none of that hesitation when telling me about the band. I nudged the timeline. "In the corridor, what did the floor feel like under your shoes?" And he delivered a generic carpet. "It's always the same," which is what you say when you're choosing safety over memory. I narrowed the lanes. "When you stepped into the back office, which hand pushed the door? Left or right?" "Right," he said quickly. A speed that made it feel pre-selected. "Was the handle cold or warm?" "Cold," he said. Crisp. Those answers sounded like copies of questions. Not like he'd actually touched anything. Behind him, a server balanced a tray of tiny that looked like promises. In front of me, his story wobbled as soon as it got within breathing distance of the safe room, a place he insisted he hadn't gone near, which is why I made the corridor shrink around him. "Let us do it tighter. Start with the exact moment you left the ballroom. Give me a backward 1 meter at a time. Who was within arm's reach before you turned down the corridor?" His right shoulder lifted in a single shrug the instant he said, "I think Mrs. Kana, or maybe Arjun." And that shrug undercut the certainty of his own words. The body, sometimes, is more honest than a sentence. Mina was in the back office with Lena, eyes red but not waterlogged, face steady the way a person gets when they realize logic might not save them. "When I took her statement, I did it the same way I did do a violin, tuning first, then melody neutral questions to find her natural rhythm." Then the reverse? What? She didn't glide into the kind of neat sequence that makes auditors sigh with pleasure. She stopped and circled back. She inserted facts like dropped stitches she'd found. She said, "Door stuck a little because the carpet's swollen from the rain. I hip bumped it. Handle was warm from the caterer who just came out, and that sort of messy, unheroic precision arrives the way honest memory arrives. With elbows and fingerprints." She said, "No, wait before that I put the envelope down on the Cherno, the arm of the chair because my hands were full. And that kind of self-correction, the willingness to be inelegant, is a smell I have come to trust." Back in the hallway, I gave Ravi a fair chance because nobody should fail a test they were never taught to take. I ran the reverse trick on a neutral topic. "Walk me backward through making your morning coffee." And he did it easily. Flicked the switch with his knuckle, because his hands were damp from rinsing the mug. Kettle beeped twice. He reached for the jar by muscle memory. In other words, the man could reverse, recall, which meant the difficulty was selective, arriving exactly where the night had sprouted a story. I returned him to the corridor and asked for a soundtrack. "What song was playing right before you left the ballroom?" "Jazz," he said, "which is like answering food. When asked what you ate, which one?" I asked, and he said, "Something with trumpet, but the band," I remembered, had been on a violin interlude right then because the MZI liked to make raffle announcements over strings. His answers loosened further when I asked for a person who had eyes on him as he turned down the corridor. He said he didn't recall, although half an hour earlier he told a volunteer he loved how the photographer caught candid hallway shots. I felt the trick doing its work the way friction does work. Not dramatic, but sure. Lies hate friction, and reverse is pure grit. The safe room had an electronic keypad and a mechanical latch. The keypad log for the hour in question was blank maintenance mode. Allegedly so, the door could have been propped open from inside if someone never let it swing fully shut. When I walked the corridor myself, I saw no wedge and felt the rug snag on the back office threshold just where Mina had said it would, a soft drag that tugged at your shoe like a toddler. I asked Ravi casually as if it didn't matter, "In your backward walk, after the flowers and before the corridor, did the door swing closed behind you when you checked the back office?" "Yes," he said, fast. "Then how did the server with the cart exit?" I asked, and he said there was a wedge. A wedge I had not seen. And Mina hadn't mentioned, and the air around his word thickened the way gravy thickens. When someone turns off the heat, lies prefer vague nouns. Wedges appear like Deus Ex Machina when you ask for a worst-case detail at the wrong angle. Donors drifted toward the exit like polite ghosts. The band folded cables and pressed their tux shirts flat. Security did the choreography of looking important. In between the moving parts, I kept interviewing people backwards. The head of security grimaced but gave me the exact beat of a latch, popping the thunk of a cartwheel at the threshold. The volunteer at the door said she smelled lemon cleaners strongest at the back office around 10. The bartender, who overfilled Negronis by instinct, said he'd seen a Navy suit hover near the corridor, hand on the frame but not crossing. I stitched a map of the last 15 minutes with thread pulled from reverse accounts, and the pattern not only showed the outline of events, it showed where Ravi's narrative refused to anchor. When people tell the truth in reverse, they often add incidental details that stand outside the thread you're repulling. Glitter on the wrist from the place cards that dusted the key pouch. A violin scrape that went a little flat. The exact weight of a handle or how it slipped if your hand was damp. When people fabricate, they oversmooth or stall. They repeat your words back at you. They allow generic senses to stand in for sensations. I listened to Ravi repeat, cold handle, carpet flowers. Like he was sprinkling talc on a spill, and every time I asked him to drop the story one notch tighter 5 seconds than 5 seconds before, that his sentences looked like stage directions. He laughed, once thin and annoyed. "Is this necessary?" And I said nothing about necessity. I spoke instead about fairness, about how reverse keeps us from leading witnesses. And his mouth pressed flat before releasing the next neat sentence, as if it had been waiting already in a bowl under the counter. By 11, the gala had deflated into a handful of board members and staff whose faces had swapped the glow of philanthropy for the pallor of a group email. I gathered the core people in a small conference room under a lights that flickered with the regularity of a cheap metronome and drew a timeline on a whiteboard backward, starting with now and stepping down the wall until the pen reached the hour. It felt like climbing a well upside down. I narrated the steps because narration is a kind of mirror you can hold in front of a room. At 10:42, a person stood in the corridor. At 10:41, the back office door did not latch fully. At 10:40, the band played violin while the MC announced the raffle. At 10:39, glitter dusted the key pouch. At 10:38, a cartwheel hit the threshold with a thunk, and as I walked the room backward, people adjusted their faces the way you adjust to a sudden change in gravity. I stopped at 10:34 and said, "At Daisy Trinity Quattro." A person who says they never went near the safe described a cold handle, a swinging door, and a wedge we can't locate. And then I let the silence sit on the table and collect its own weight. Ravi exhaled long and said, "Look, even if I did pass by, it doesn't mean," and he broke himself there because there was no safe explanation that could also keep his earlier denials intact. And Lena, who had spent the last hour looking like a bridge holding too much weight, suddenly said, "Wait," and pulled up the security vendor's maintenance app. It turned out the cameras weren't teed down the way a person is down with a fever. They were in test mode, which meant they still buffered internally. The head of security blanched like a cut apple. When they loaded the buffer, there it was. At 10:41, a figure in a Navy suit was standing near the back office door, hand extended not to the keypad but to the latch inside, propping it with fingertips while a server rolled a cart through. The footage did not show theft, but it strangled the claim that he'd never been near the safe. He swallowed and said, "I was checking," and stopped because verbs were a trap now. The board members coughed their way into a consensus that sounded like managers and lawyers and self-reservation. No one would accuse anyone tonight. Auditors would expand their scope. No rash decisions would be made regarding Mina. It was not justice so much as a ceasefire, but sometimes a ceasefire is the only bridge you can build in an hour. In the weeks after, the auditors found a gap in the keypad protocol remote codes used during maintenance, and that gap pointed back to finance. No one wrote a confession, the newspapers did not call, donors did not yank their checks. Life refused television's arc and chose instead the slow grind of meetings and notes. But the night of the gala, in a corridor that smelled like lemon and rain, the one trick I carry like a pocket knife did what it always does when used cleanly and with a little patience. Reverse stripped the forward momentum from a neat lie and left it wobbling. And in that wobble people found enough courage to stop a rush to blame